welcome to Off the Podium. I have a friend, someone I've known for about 5 or 6 years now, maybe more. I can't remember now. Maybe it's 7 years. Abbie, welcome to Off the Podium.
Thanks, Tigran. I'm so excited to be here.
It's great, and I feel terrible because I kind of pushed it back. I wanted us to do this in person, and now this whole situation happened, and we're doing it on, even though we live about 15 or 20 miles from each other, we're doing this on Skype. So I'm still happy to have you. A couple of things. First, let's start with a little bit about yourself, about your journey, what you do now, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. So I am currently in Seattle, Washington, but before I moved here, I was in North Dakota where I grew up and started playing cello when I was around 5 years old. And everyone always asks me, they're like, oh, did you pick the cello? And I actually didn't. My brother, who's 2 or 3 years older than me, he started on violin. Uh-huh. And I kind of tagged along to one of his lessons at one point, and the violin teacher that he was studying with was actually a cellist originally, and I kind of said something like, oh, I want to play the violin, and she's like, actually, we're going to put you on the cello, and I didn't even care. I was like, okay, I just wanted to play something. So I started when I was 5, and I got into it really quickly, and, took piano lessons, was in different children's choirs, and then I knew pretty early on that I wanted to make music a big part of my life. I don't know that I thought, okay, I want this to be a career, but I knew it was going to be very important to me. And then I, ended up going to college for music. My first year was at Concordia College in Moorhead, Minnesota, very Lutheran private school. They have an amazing music department there with great teachers, but it just didn't fit for me. And so I ended up transferring back home to Minot, North Dakota, where I studied with a teacher, Eric Anderson, that I had worked with him before, and I just knew that we clicked. So I studied cello in undergrad, and towards the end, I was, thinking, okay, I need to go on to more school or figure something out, but that's what most musicians do. You go on to more school, and I was preparing all of my applications for cello. That was what I was going to do. I didn't know if I was going to be a chamber musician, a soloist, but that was what my plan was. And then I started to kind of get into, I wouldn't say conducting specifically, but I got into the ideas of the thought process that go into, how conductors study scores. And it started off with just studying Bach cello suites with the different voicing, and then it went into string quartets, and then in symphony rehearsals I started bringing a score with me, and I was like, this is really interesting, a whole different perspective on music. And so then I did a really brief workshop for conducting, and then one of my friends was like, why are you just applying for cello for grad school? Why don't you do some conducting auditions? And I laughed. I had no idea what I was doing. I felt so awkward on the podium. It seemed totally stupid to do that. But I took a leap of faith, and I put together some videos and sent in applications to a number of places, and it was narrowed down between Boston Conservatory and University of Washington, and now I'm here, and that's where we met.
Yeah, on the day of your audition.
Oh yeah, so nervous. I think I did Schubert's Unfinished Symphony. Yeah, but you were awesome. You were such a welcoming person. But yeah, so then I ended up getting in here, and I picked Seattle because it just felt right. It just felt like the right choice. And David Robbie is he has such a great mind and such a great educator. So he's taught me a lot, but also it was just great to have the experience of working with Ludo at Seattle Symphony and getting to work with them. So yeah, and then I graduated, and I didn't know exactly what was going to happen after that. And around August of the fall after I graduated, I ended up getting this request from Pierce College down in Puyallup, Washington, that they were in need of an orchestra director, just like very last minute. So just kind of the opportunity just, I was lucky. It just kind of fell in my lap. And so I jumped on it, and now I've been there this is the kind of finishing up of my third year. And unfortunately, this is the last year that I'm there. I kind of regret in some ways the decision of leaving, but the commute is tough. I'm spending most of my time now as director of music and liturgy at a Catholic church in Wedgwood. So I'm still looking for different opportunities to conduct orchestras. But it's tough, especially right now, as you know.
Yeah, it's crazy. But I was going to say, I've heard great things about what you've done with the program there. So tell me a little bit about what you've done there and what you've built there from practically nothing, from what I understand, and what it takes to build a small organization, or what you could do with a small organization. Because sometimes conductors look at a small organization, they say, well, there's nothing you could really do. What can you do? What have you done? Share some of your experience.
Yeah. So when I ended up there in the fall of 2017, it still is. We're finding new opportunities to make it a full orchestra, but it was just a string orchestra. A lot of them community members, only a handful of students. So it was a mix of both. And I think the biggest challenge for me was working with ensembles of such a big age range is challenging. You know, you have some high school students, 14, 15, 16 years old, and you have some 70, 75 years old. So that's a big challenge to try and create the right atmosphere and the right expectations as an ensemble as a whole, but then also the different ages. But I went into it certainly trying to get a feel for like what they've done in the past and the repertoire that they did. And it was a lot of just kind of basic arrangements of things. But right away, I could get a sense from the musicians that they wanted more. They wanted to be challenged, and they wanted to experience more like legitimate string repertoire. And so I started to try and gradually incorporate things like, you know, Grieg's Holberg suite and stuff like that. And it was a challenge at first. It definitely stretched them technically and musically. But once you gave them that opportunity to like kind of explore that, it just fueled more, and they were even more motivated to learn and even more motivated to practice. And so I just kind of kept building off of that, and each quarter they've grown leaps and bounds. Like, I'm so proud of them, the progress. And everyone always says like, oh, well, you know, it was you were the one who built this. And I understand what they're saying when they say that, but I'm such a firm believer that what it really is you're just enabling them. You're just giving them a platform to learn and discover, and that's really all that I did. And I just tried to keep encouraging them, and each quarter they built on what they left in the last quarter, and it's been amazing to witness it.
So with all that said, and this is something we've talked about in person, but what is the success of a young conductor? What does it mean to be a successful young conductor?
Yeah, this is a tough thing to kind of process. I think, at least for me as a young conductor, we've talked about it, like you said. I've spent a lot of time in the last couple of years trying to figure out like what do I need to do to be seen as successful? What do I need to do to get that next job, or most importantly, feel successful? And I think a lot of young conductors, maybe it's not a spoken thing, but it's kind of an unspoken assumption that you aren't successful unless you're working with a big orchestra, even if you're just an assistant or an associate or a fellow or whatever, you're not making waves unless you're working with professionals or having your name or face on posters or whatever. And I really believe that is just so far from the truth. And I've still needed time to kind of process that and really learn that for myself. But working with the Pierce College Orchestra totally showed me that that's just not the case. I've left so many rehearsals with them. Obviously, they're not a professional group. They're students and community members at a fairly beginner, intermediate level. There's a few advanced players, but they're not professionals, and they're still learning how to just get around their instrument a lot of the time. But I would leave some rehearsals feeling so fulfilled and inspired and motivated for the next rehearsal. And that really just showed me that that's what success is. That's what, you're striving for as a musician and a leader and an educator. You want to really provide and go along with those experiences with those musicians. I'm sure there are a lot of professional conductors who leave their rehearsals not feeling those those feelings and not feeling fulfilled in some ways, whether it's just because it was a bad rehearsal or, you're working with musicians who are, those professionals are spread thin. They're doing a lot of different things. They're teaching at universities. They're private, doing private lessons, things like that. So it was a very refreshing experience to be able to work with these young musicians with young minds and wanting to just keep discovering.
Yeah, and it's important to know or think about that you're making a big difference in the lives of these people, and they're going to be inspired and encouraging. Some of them will have kids, and they'll encourage them to be supportive of the arts, and so you're making a difference on that level as well, where in the professional world, some of these musicians, especially seeing a young conductor, might say, oh, we've played that symphony 15 times and we don't want to do it. I actually, a couple of weeks ago, talked to a conductor, I won't say the name, but had a meeting with a conductor in Seattle, I'll give you that, that conducted first professional orchestra and went all over, over these things that he wanted to do and work on various aspects of the piece. And when it came to actual performance time, the orchestra just went and did whatever he asked them to slow down in this one section. They did it. They disregarded that. They just did whatever they wanted to do. So it's different things. When in a youth orchestra or community orchestra, you might ask them things, and even if no other conductor has ever asked them, even if they don't know the piece, they'll still do something for you that you want to try as a conductor.
And it's not even a power thing of like, okay, they're going to do what I asked them to do because this is still new to them. It's totally just like an exploration sort of thing, like they're in it with you to learn and discover it.
Yeah. You mentioned something about choirs. You've been in choirs, and I remember at the University of Washington you were part of the choir as well. Conducting a choir versus an orchestra or a wind ensemble, whatever you want. Just some of those differences that you've noticed, or maybe through your work that you've realized.
Yeah, I get asked that a lot, especially when I started conducting the choir at the church I work at now. A lot of them, wondered, well, you got a degree in instrumental conducting, so do you even know anything about the human voice or choirs? And as you said, I was really lucky. I was able to sing in Jeffrey Bohr's choir at the University of Washington most of the time that I was studying there, and that was a huge learning experience for me. I certainly did it to be a part of the ensemble, but I really wanted to do it to learn from Jeffrey and see how he works with choirs and getting different ideas of using their bodies. And it was, I realized it was all very very mental. It wasn't a lot of actual technique. It was kind of abstract ideas of this is how your body needs to feel when you sing this. And I think in some ways that translates to instrumentalists as well. It's all about the body and how do you feel when you play this. And so, there are some things that kind of go both ways for instrumentalists and vocalists. But, with choirs, I've actually noticed I've taken a lot of what I say in rehearsals with my string players over to choir rehearsals, and finding ways to get them to sing longer, fuller phrases. You can easily say this needs to feel like you have the longest violin bow, and stuff like that. The biggest difference, I would say, is with choir you have text. That's a very obvious difference, but you're not just singing musical lines and phrases and melodies. You're trying to express a very specific text that the librettist or the composer, whoever, put together. So that's been a big focus for me with my choir, is certainly the music underneath it, but the text is something that really, really needs to come to the forefront. And how can you express that text without getting in the way of the music too? So it's been a learning experience, but I think it's definitely been fun, and it's taught me kind of how to work with instrumentalists even more, and then vice versa. Yeah. You kind of get both.
Yeah. This is all great insight, because I personally have not worked with choirs a lot, so it's always great to see. But Jeffrey Boris, who you talked about, I've been to some of his rehearsals at the University of Washington, and he's a fascinating person. I actually should have him on my podcast and talk to him about this.
It would be great. He'd have a lot of great things to say.
So now the big question for you is conductor and female conductor. What do you have to say about that? And again, this for the listener, they don't know, but we've talked about these things with Abbie. I've known her for a long time, far more than many of my guests. So some of these questions might be repetitive to her, but go for it. I want to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I'll just say this first. This is an intro to all this. I'm very supportive of conductors who happen to be female. Uh-huh. I want there to be more females who feel inspired to become conductors or musicians in general. I do think we need more of them. I support that 100%. However, the thing that has really kind of fascinated me over the last few years, as I've really gone into conducting and grown as a conductor musician, is this idea of female conductors, quotations, female conductors. And I've always just really believed that I want to be seen as a great conductor. I don't want to be seen as a great female conductor. I want to get a job because of how great I did my work. Yeah. I made a difference in the actual work that I did, not because, well, she's really great and she's female, so we should have her, diversity. Yeah. An experience I had at Montreux School of Music, it was an amazing experience. I only went one summer when I was studying here at UW, but I recommend any conductor to just go one summer to see what it's like and experience learning a ton of rep in a short amount of time. But this particular summer, the board, great people, they were really looking at different ways to develop the school and to develop ways to inspire and pull from more diverse populations, one of them being females. And I remember she was a lovely lady. She asked me to have lunch with her one afternoon when I was studying there, and she wanted to kind of pick my brain about, how can Montreux School attract more females. And so we met up for lunch, and she asked me the question. We chatted a bit, and I felt awful inside because I felt that what I was about to tell her, she was probably just going to lose her mind and think, why did I even take this young woman out for lunch? But, she asked me my thoughts, and I finally said, I think what you're doing as a board is great. Keep trying to get more people. But I was just very honest with her, and I said, I think that you might be doing a disservice by specifically seeking out female conductors. I think you should just set a standard of, what kind of musicians and students, conductors are we looking for to come here, and have that standard set regardless of gender. And, if there are females who apply and they're great, awesome, accept them, but don't try and just accept females just because they're female. So yeah, I'm just, like I said, I support female conductors and them trying to, what do they say? Glass ceiling, breaking the glass ceiling. I encourage that, but I just want to really encourage organizations and musicians themselves to really look at just the core of the musician, not what gender they are.
Yeah. That's great perspective. I love your thoughts. And I could tell that you've thought a lot about this, because you're so articulate and clear when you're describing all the things that you're thinking. So it's great to hear your thoughts. I love it. One thing that I remember, and you mentioned this when we met a couple of weeks ago, is Norway. You spent some time there. Some thoughts on Norway, but also not just Norway. I also want to hear some things about North Dakota, because I just don't know anything. Some fun things that you grew up with that people might not know about North Dakota, and because all of us growing up in certain parts of the world associate some happy and maybe some not so happy memories with our hometowns. So some things about North Dakota, but also I want to hear your journey to Norway, why you picked Norway to go there and study there, and some thoughts on Norway.
Yeah, so I'll start with Norway. So I guess I kind of tie perfectly together the two questions. But growing up in North Dakota, it's a very Scandinavian state. Some Germans, but definitely Swedish, Norwegian population. And my grandmother, she's 95. She's still going. I think it is the Norwegian genes. She's just like so with it still. She's 100% Norwegian. And so at a very young age, just because of the culture in North Dakota, and then also my grandmother, my Norwegian heritage was something that I just found very interesting and fascinating. And Minot, North Dakota, my hometown, is actually home to hosting the largest Scandinavian festival in North America.
Wow.
So it's huge. They get people from all over the world. Thousands of people come for like 1 week in end of September, early October, where it's just a festival of Scandinavian music, food, art, crafts, books, music, all performers of any kind you can really think of, and just kind of celebrating the heritage of Scandinavia. And it's so much fun. And you see, sometimes you only see those people that 1 week each year, but it's just a lot of fun. And so one year, I always have to tell people this, it wasn't a pageant. I'm not a pageant princess or queen, but I was crowned in 2012, 2013, Miss Norsk Kystfest, which is the name of the festival. And it was an amazing experience because I got to meet some very incredible people from all over the world, especially Norway. But that same fall, I had decided I wanted to go study in Norway. And I wasn't wanting to go to study music necessarily. I just kind of wanted to go and experience the culture and learn more of the language. I had already taken a couple of courses in Norwegian. So I just decided, you know what, this is what I'm going to do. So January 2013, I got on a plane and flew over to Norway, and I was so excited and so terrified. It was kind of my first experience really being that far away from home. I knew some Norwegians there, but I was more or less going to a country where I didn't know anybody and hardly knew the language. And you'd think like, oh, well, if you're going to be in Oslo, most of them can speak English. But I was going to school in a very, very small town where a lot of them didn't speak great English. So it was a huge step out of my comfort zone, and very good for me. I look back and it was one of the best decisions I've ever made. So yeah, as I said, I didn't really study music specifically when I was there, but I did take a course where part of the semester was about folk music, and I also made an effort to find an orchestra there that I could play cello in.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I played in the Grenland Symphony Orchestra, which was an amazing experience. I think I did 2 or 3 concerts with them. One of the concerts, I think we did, I think it was like a Tchaikovsky piano concerto or something, with one of the greatest Norwegian pianists, Håvard Jimse. And that whole experience was insane because it's all in Norwegian. So you have a 2-hour rehearsal. Those are exhausting in and of itself, even in English or your native language. And so I did every rehearsal. I'm sitting there translating on the spot in my head, trying to figure out what the conductor was asking for in Norwegian. And it was a thrilling experience. I should send a thank you card to my stand partner for all of the help translating every rehearsal. But yeah, so that was an incredible experience, and I got to meet a lot of different orchestral musicians there. And one of my final projects for school during that semester was kind of writing a paper on Grieg, who's one of my absolute favorite composers. I'd say Grieg and Dvorak, but I feel like Grieg is such an underrated composer. He writes some incredible stuff. I should say he wrote some incredible stuff. But so yeah, I went to Bergen, Norway, and went to his house, and you can walk through parts of it, and him and his wife are buried in the cliffside below their home over like this gorgeous body of water. So yeah, it was an incredible experience, and just kind of like deepened my love for my heritage, but also helped me learn more about music in a different culture too.
Yeah, isn't there a Grieg concert hall there as well?
Yes, there is. Yeah. There's a giant statue of him outside of it too. So
cool.
Yeah, it's a beautiful place. Have you ever been to Norway?
Never.
You should go. Oh my gosh, it's beautiful.
I have a couple more questions. One, with all the things that you're doing musically, do you have time for anything for yourself? Time for personal life and hobbies and other things? How do you kind of balance those two, the career and the personal life and hobbies and all that?
Yeah, so that's like a really big thing for me, and one of the things I actually learned while living in Norway is kind of this like they have a very strong desire to have a great work-life balance. They slow down quite a bit. So when I moved back from Norway, that was something that I really tried to hold on to, is this balance between finding enjoyment outside of what you do as a career. So yeah, I try to stay very physically active. I go through spurts of going to the pool and swimming. I used to be a competitive swimmer,
I went online and I searched your name. I found some of your your competition numbers and times and all this stuff. So it was interesting. I was going to ask you about that, so it's great that you mentioned it. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I still try and swim a bit. It's harder and harder to find easy access to different pools, but I try and swim. I hate running. I really don't like it. I guess maybe shorter distances, but it's so convenient and it's nice to get out and get fresh air. So I have done a few half marathons and try and stick with running on occasion. But yeah, I do try and find the time and create the space of no work, whether it's watching Netflix or chatting with friends over a glass of wine or traveling. Like I definitely try and get back home to North Dakota. My family still lives there, and I don't know that I'd ever want to move back there, but I definitely love going home to visit, and it's pretty slow paced, much more quiet, farmland, the lake. So that's something that I really believe in for musicians, that the time away from music, the more time you can get away from music, not saying that you should not practice or not study, but that just fuels your musicians even more. Those experiences that you have in your relationships or other hobbies or interests, it just can inform your musicianship and the emotions you can exert so much more, I think.
Yeah. This is great, Abbie. One more thing, and this is from someone who sent a question. Something new that you're most excited to learn, whether it's repertoire or other things that are not music related, maybe. What are you most excited to learn?
Good question. We're always learning. I'll give you one kind of music thing and one non-music thing. Musically speaking, I have always been very interested in conducting ballets.
Okay.
I used to be a ballerina for a good chunk of my life.
Wow.
And that was kind of one of the music and ballet were like the two main things growing up for me. So I have a strong love for the ballet, and so getting more experience, I think conducting ballets would be incredible. Studying some of those scores, and I think it'd be fun to see, my experience as being a ballerina coupled with conducting. It would be fun to see where that would go. Outside of music, I spent time when I was younger learning languages. I studied a couple of years of French, a year or two of German. Of course, I learned Norwegian. I think getting back into some new languages would be fun. Maybe you could teach me some Armenian.
Yes, that'd be interesting. Although the thing about languages, I feel like you should learn the language that millions of people speak. With Armenian, you would only hit about 9 million people in the world. Where
sure,
if you learn Spanish, it'll be a couple of 100 million,
Sure, yes. But yeah, I think learning another language would be good for my brain.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, one more thing actually from a listener. I think you answered this at the beginning, so that's why I kind of skipped it. But I'll say it again. Maybe you have some newer thoughts. What made you want to be a conductor?
I never had an aha moment of like, yep, this is what I want to do. I'm going to be a conductor. And I'll be honest, even today, I still question what I'm doing and wonder, is conducting what I should be doing? Should I be a musician? Should I be a music therapist? I've even considered going into that. Or should I do nothing with music, at least as a career? And honestly, the thing that has really kept me in music, and I guess conducting specifically, is the people. Mm-hmm. The experiences that you have with other musicians, like getting to have these conversations with you, and learning new insights from other musicians, and getting to meet new musicians around the world. Just yesterday, I think it was, I sat on a conference call with 190 conductors throughout the world. Yeah, Conductors Collective, I think is what it's called. It's kind of a new platform for all of us to kind of get together and chat and learn. But honestly, it's truly the people that keep me in music, because that's like really what it's all about. If you didn't have the people to share it with, it only goes so far, But yeah, I mean, that's something else too. I think it's important to keep questioning the music and questioning, why am I doing this? Why am I a conductor?
Yeah.
Why am I going to go to this rehearsal? And I think it keeps things fresh and exciting.
I love it. And there are other things we could talk about. Maybe we should do another one some other time, but thanks so much for joining me. That was fun.
Thank you, Tigran.
It's always a different experience for me to have a friend, someone I've known, talk because it's more like a conversation. That's why I, even with some past guests, I have this composer, a performer, James Gardner from New Zealand, that has joined me a couple of times. He's an expert on Frank Zappa. He works for Radio New Zealand, and he's done amazing programs. So I've had him on about 3 times at this point, and I have never met him in person. So by the 3rd time, it's already been such a great conversation because I feel like I've gotten to know him. So I hope to do with some of my other guests as well. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Tigran.